Oh, well, hello, everyone. We're going to just crack on then. It's 2 o'clock. And I'm going to do you. So, Sandy, you like my tribal age metric? Maybe I should share that on the birthday this year. So, yeah, welcome anyway for joining. This is our first ever sort of community event where we're bringing the actual community alive from LinkedIn group onto a Zoom call. I think we did try it with audio, didn't we, Justina? Voice of the Universe. We tried LinkedIn audio there.
We did indeed, and there's been far too many technical issues with that to be able to introduce that at this stage.
But maybe one day we might take it over to a LinkedIn audio event through the group. That'd be pretty cool. So this is a conversation and an extension of our Social Business Exchange event, which happened, I can't believe it was last month. Was it really only a month ago? Gosh, it feels a lot longer than then. But anyway, and it was brilliant. And we are still buzzing from that. The energy in the room, the conversations, the noise when I'm watching some of the videos back, the noise, it was amazing. I'm sorry for anyone who couldn't make it. And I know, Sandy, you wanted to come. Maybe we take it on tour. I don't know. But we have invited back a couple of the speakers from that session because there were a lot of questions that were raised in the session, but also after as well. And we just thought we could revisit some of the topics. So for those that didn't come to the event, you can learn a little bit more, but we can also maybe dig into a bit more of the experience from Rachel and Danielle. So this is the most important thing, though, that this is a conversation between the community, and this is what we want to try and create. And if this sort of goes well, we might start hosting this on a regular basis and bring a platform in. We start sharing. We just want an extension of the event and try and exchange. So it's a bit like socialmedia.org, but without the payment. So you can learn from each other, but not have to pay for it. So, right, before I go on, you can all talk. I don't know if Justina said you can talk. Maybe you can unmute yourselves or mute yourselves. You can do that. And you can use the chat. So if you want to just talk amongst yourselves and share and exchange, or if you want to ask us something, please be part of the conversation. Just drop all your questions, comments, and everything in there. And Justina, who is the voice of the universe? Justina?
Hi, everyone.
There you go. No one can see her, but we can all hear her. She's going to tell us the questions that come out in the chat. So today, I am really pleased to be joined by our guests today. So we have Rachel Burdus-Cook from Ericsson, who talked about activating leaders at our event last month. We also have Danielle Guzman from Marsh McLennan. I get my words mixed up. It used to be Mercer, but now moved over. So we've got Danielle as well. And we also have Jean-Louis Benard from Sociable as well. And we're going to have a right old good conversation. So, what does that? I don't see the way to talk. Not a big deal, though. Sandy can't see how to unmute. Oh, there you go. Oh, Justina has the power. So not only is she the voice of the universe, she also has control. There you go. So you have quite a lot of power on this, Justina. I'm getting a bit worried about that. Right, so we're going to get started. We've booked in an hour. If it's quicker than that, that's fine. If it takes up to the hour, that's also fine, but we will respect your time. Now, the first topic on the agenda was measurement. Now, it wasn't on the agenda last time. We went a different which way, I think, but the key topic is about how you measure social activation programs. And this one came up quite a lot. It's one that you talked about, Jean-Louis. And I remember the one that you put that graph up that showed about the algorithm change on LinkedIn. Everyone was taking pictures of that, including me. And I saw it over social as well. You talked a little bit in the deep dive session about how people are currently measuring today. For those who missed that conference, do you want to just give us a quick overview, Jean-Louis, and just talk about what you covered?
Yes, sure. As you said, measurement is a key topic, and especially for demonstrating ROI. But most of the time, companies still struggle, to define what should be measured. And I think that a part of the feeling that their efforts fall short is linked to the fact that the objectives of the program are unclear, and sometimes even if the objectives are clear, the way to measure the results are unclear. So what we talked about is a very simple 4-step methodology. The first step is really about how you align your program with the company business objectives. The second step is how to set up the right KPIs. I will quickly come back on this point. The third step is once you have the KPI, you define the targets. And the fourth step is, okay, with the right tools, you measure, you understand, and you improve. And in this very simple 4 steps methodology, I think the most difficult part is aligning the program with business objectives. And because you need to be very clear about what your program will contribute to, and whether you can truly gain exec buy-in for it. And sometimes you start working on something, but it's not fully aligned with the expectations of the execs. And additionally, you should be able to clearly demonstrate the program's contribution. And so this contribution can be related to deals influence or lead generation, candidate generation, reputation, presence of execs on social media. All these objectives are great, but they are very different. And the way you are going to measure it will be completely different. And I think that's the second biggest challenge we talked about. And after, I think it will be interesting to have the feedback maybe of Danielle and Rachel and how they measure it. But when it comes to KPI, people often confuse KPIs related to the business objective with what we call with what I like to call steering KPIs. Okay, so typically the number of shares and click is not a business KPI. And I was surprised, when we had this workshop looking at the metrics. Most of the metrics that showed up were for me steering KPIs and not business KPIs. So number of deals influenced by the program, number of candidates who visit your career website. Okay, this can be a business KPI, or for example, the percentage of your execs who are active on social media. Okay, it can be a business KPI, but clicks, shares is probably not, I would say, business KPI, but probably most of the time it's easier. Okay, it's something that is probably doesn't connect to execs expectation, and sometimes it's not easy to be clear on the execs expectation. So sometimes we find a way to escape and focus on steering KPIs. But these metrics are just an indicator of are you on the right way? But this is not the target.
No, I think that's what, I mean, sometimes I think with impressions and thousands and millions of reach, and sometimes I guess that we fall into the trap of impressing people with big numbers. And that's what you're saying is, let's just separate these out, business KPIs, steering KPIs. I love that. And also it depends on the program as well. What is your objective? Increase talent, engagement, attraction. I'm interested, Danielle, how do you measure? Because your program is, you explain a little bit about your program and how you measure it.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah and Jean-Louis. So we use both what Jean-Louis calls the steering KPIs, and then I guess more business related KPIs. And we call them primary and secondary KPIs. Okay. So we have that across the whole social ecosystem. And we do weigh heavily on both. And the reason for that is we tie employee advocacy to organic social for us. So it's all one team. So it's all one program. And as the slide that Jean-Louis shared, which I believe was from Richard Vanderblom at the event, the ability of a company page or an individual to achieve the same amount of organic visibility today as 2-3 years ago, it keeps decreasing year over year. So you need to offset that. So that's why we do use what we call the primary KPIs, which Jean-Louis called the steering KPIs, to help us see and be able to talk about how we're offsetting that decrease. So for example, we do use clicks, we do use engagements of our employees, we do use traffic to the website and earned media, tying back to kind of brand awareness and overall engagement, to say that the channels are doing less year over year. And we can see that until we offset with what our employees can add back in, what our influencers can add back in, and what paid media can add back in. But then again, that just shows you kind of directionally, right? And then on top of that, our other steering KPIs is we use adoption rate and activation rate, because it's one thing to invite colleagues to participate in the program. So we want to know how many are invited, how many opt in. And then activation rate for us is measured on a weekly basis, meaning we want an advocate to be active every single week, not on a monthly basis or anything else. So that way we truly have an active base. So that way we can know how many people are participating into the content that we're bringing forward to them. But then when we look through to kind of the business side, then it depends on the pillar. So for one big one for us is talent. So for talent, we look specifically at how many applications were filled for open jobs that were promoted by colleagues through advocacy, and then how many hires. So that tells that business specifically the kind of the value they're getting. When we look at our business campaigns, we look specifically at event registrations for particular events. Some of those registrations cost money, like our global investments forums run you $10,000 a seat, and we sell all of that through social. We also look at downloads of content that is, you have a form fill, for example, that leads to a consultation. And then we also have pay for purchase. So we do have a lot of reports that we put through social that colleagues promote that you actually have to click to buy right in that moment. So those are some examples of how we then tie that directly back to the business to kind of show you the difference.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've written loads. I love that about adoption rate and activation rate. So it's not about how many people you just get in the program, it's how successful the program becomes as well. So you look at that on a weekly basis. I'm going to come on to that a bit later. No, that's really good, Danielle. Rachel, I was going to ask you as well, because you talked about leadership activation, and Jean-Louis kind of touched a little bit on that. You know, how many leaders have we got active? Is there anything else that you look at when it comes to leadership activation?
Yeah, so it's really interesting listening to everyone, because you can take bits of what everyone's doing and bring them into your own programs. And I can see similarities in our programs, and probably where we have some gaps where we can, you know, do some things a bit differently. I think for our leaders, yes, we look at how many of them we have on there, but it's not just a numbers game. It's about how what their impact is like when they're on social. So those engagement metrics are actually quite important in that sense. And similarly, when we look across our other programs, not just how active they are, but how much impact that activity has. So those engagement metrics, I think, for us are quite important. But our execs and our leaders as well, what we also do is on a quarterly basis, look at a social impact study. So that helps us to place where our leaders and our execs are in relation to our competitors and to our peers in their activity on LinkedIn. So we can see if we're behind the curve, ahead of the curve, what more we need to do to get our leaders activated. So that's something we started doing recently. We do that on a quarterly basis. I think we're 2 quarters in now. So early insights for us, but then that really helps with those. I love the way Jean-Louis puts it, steering metrics. What do we need to do to steer the program in the right direction? And I think the metrics that you look at are really dependent on what it is you're trying to achieve, what it is that you're trying to demonstrate. And they are different for each of the different programs that we have.
Yeah.
Not a one size fits all, sadly.
No. But what about yeah, that's, I think, that what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to demonstrate. And also, actually, a good point you've made there, Rachel, about being agile and steering. So, you know, I'm sorry if you can hear my cat, she's deaf. It's not my tummy. It's just, and it's typical, isn't it, when I'm doing this? So she's right under the desk and she's very loud. So, yeah, I think that's quite, you know, being agile, being frequent enough that you can notice, okay, there's a trend going on here. We may need to course correct or adjust slightly, but not doing it too frequently that you're not seeing any changes. So it sounds, from what I'm hearing, different types of metrics require maybe different types of frequencies. So maybe the steering KPIs can be something monthly, and the business KPIs can maybe quarterly or 6 monthly. We've got a couple of questions here, so thank you. Hello, Chloe. In addition to looking at business goals, how can you show execs in the short term that employer branding advocacy efforts are worth the longer term investment? So that's a really good one. So if you're in like pilot phase where you're trying to demonstrate, I don't know if any of you got anything to say about that one. I won't take it around the table, but
I mean, I can just share. I know, so when we originally started, and even now with some of the other businesses, kind of getting them started, we just look for what can you show in 30, 60, 90 days. And I think even in as little as 30 days. So every time we run any campaign, like a business campaign, we report on a monthly basis for every campaign. And for that campaign, we show the performance. So on a company page, that includes just your standard, clicks, impressions, which I hate, but it's, we just have it all there. So you got your clicks, impressions, traffic to the website, you've got your engagements per share. And that's just for performance on a company page and any social channel. But then we show the advocacy alongside of that. So we basically mirror the company content performance with advocacy. And right off the bat, you're going to notice a company page can only share so many times. So if the company page can promote your event maybe 3 to 5 times, I'm making this up, in a 10-day period, advocacy is going to be a significant multiplier on the visibility it gets to that particular asset. So we're able to just show that with everything equal, you're getting more visibility, more engagement at a multiplier effect than you will just doing the brand content. And so that's not even getting to the business level KPIs, but it shows you at least how you get that much more and why that's important, because when you look at the changes to the visibility that a company page has organically, this is helping to offset that. And we also saw a stat in first quarter, I got it from LinkedIn specifically, and they told us that the average B2B buyer needs 3 to 11 impressions of the exact same thing for them to take an action. So if you think of that and think of your company page being able to create 3 to 11 impressions with the same individual, that's not that easy to do. So you need your employees to help enable that so that they do take that click through, they do register for that event, or they do download, or whatever that call to action is that you're really seeking.
Yeah, brilliant answer. Wow, 3 to 11 impressions on the same content. When you dovetail that into how many buyers influence a buying decision, and how many times they need to see a piece of content, this is why you need to matrix your approach out to lots of employees. That's brilliant. Thank you, Danielle. I'm going to also ask as well, because we've got other topics, about how do you show leaders' activity impact, showing the impact of more people-focused content, such as blog articles, as opposed to just sharing content thought leadership or thought leadership content? How do you show leaders? Maybe that's one for you, Rachel. How do you show a leader that they're making impact?
So with our, with our leadership programs, it's all very tailored one-on-one support that we give them to help them understand what it is to be a leader on social, because it's obviously very different from some of our other functions throughout the business. And within those tailored programs, they get monthly reports. And in those monthly reports, we look at all the metrics, which I guess are like the steering metrics to help us make sure that the program is hitting the right note and going in the right direction. So obviously we look at things like impressions and how the SSI has grown, but within that, individual posts. So we'll look at top performing posts and look at what the content was, what type of a post it was, whether it was a video or a blog post or whatever, but also what the content was, so that we can start to segment. Not only was it about our technology, but was it involving people or whatever. So within those monthly reports, we can then start to build a picture over the 6-month program or however long they go on for, as to which pieces of content are resonating the best, and we can start including more of those within the program. But it also shows our leaders the kind of content that resonates, and people-focused content is always goes down absolutely brilliantly on LinkedIn, because that's what we're all about, isn't it? Wanting to see our people and see what we can bring. So I think that's what we tend to do on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. We report individually for them, and then obviously you can aggregate those up into a bigger report for leadership to show impact. Brilliant,
thank you. Hope that answers. Oh yeah,
can I just add to that quickly too, with Rachel was sharing, because I love that. One of the things we do as well for our leaders is we have everyone that's in our leadership program turn on creator mode. Because that gives you access to all the analytics on the profile. And then we make them optimize their profiles, obviously, before they get started, because you don't want to drive traffic to an incomplete profile. But then we have them measure. So we give them like an Excel document. And when you're in the program, either someone that works with you or the individual themselves are accountable. But we have them also pull the traffic to view the profile views. Because we'll notice that as soon as they start doing what the program is asking them to do, they're going to start scaling the number of views that they get. And every one of those views is an opportunity to interact back and start a conversation with that individual. And then we also have them look in the creator mode analytics. There's like charts that show your engagement, that shows your views, etc. So you can actually see, is your content building in momentum and visibility on the platform, or is it falling flat, or is it going downhill, or is it peaking, to then be able to see what caused those peaks and how can create more of those moments, and then what caused the lulls, and maybe there's a different approach to how we approach putting that content out there if it's something that they need to keep putting out but perhaps wasn't authentic enough, or maybe, I don't know, there's something about the way that it was articulated that just didn't resonate with their audience.
Yeah, or in the wrong format even, you know, and then you start to play with things, don't you? So the more you track it, the more you can start to see what's working for their audience and what's not. I love that. And I was just thinking something about profile views that you just said then. Oh, did I write it down? No, it'll come back. There's something you said about profile views, and I thought that was quite interesting. I'm looking at also who's engaging with posts as well. Wow, lots to share here. Rachel, what metrics are you able to track for competitors and peers that's useful for these quarterly reports? Are you tracking competitors and peers, and if so, how?
Yeah, so the social impact report kind of takes an aggregated report of all of our people within the organization on LinkedIn, and how they're performing versus competitors. So it will be kind of number or percentage of Salesforce, for example, within the different businesses who are active on LinkedIn, for example. It looks at all sorts of things like that across the different functions that we have. So for our leaders, for our execs, for our salespeople, for all employees. So we can get a snapshot as to how competitive we're being on LinkedIn versus our competition and our peers. We also look at within that who we've got within our employee advocacy program platform, who's posting through that platform onto LinkedIn, who's on LinkedIn and posting on there, but not through our platform. So it really helps us to identify more people that we can bring into the program to either use the platform and engage other people to join, but also create content to bring into the platform for us to help engage more people and have more relevant content in there. So it looks at all sorts of things like that. But yeah, so it helps us identify new people and helps us just to see where we are versus everyone else in the industry.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. And I just wondered, actually, we kept talking about that graph, but those that didn't come to the event that are here probably didn't see it. So I don't know if somebody in the background can pop it in there, if they can grab hold of it and find it. But right, so moving on, I'm going to move on because we're moving on the time. Community engagement at scale, let's talk about that. Now, this is something, Danielle, you talked at the event, how you engage employees, the knowledge and the ideas to keep employees on the program, because quite often I think maybe before I come to you, Danielle, maybe you can, Jean-Louis, can talk about trends, because you must see this all the time with companies that launch programs and everyone's excited, and then potentially, you know, what's the typical life cycle of a program if it's not managed properly? And then maybe, Danielle, you can talk a little bit about what you shared at the session. And I can go on mute so you can't hear my cat. So Jean-Louis, could you go first? Talk a bit about that.
Yes, sure. I think the cycle you described is a typical cycle. Most of the time at the beginning, you get the attention of the exec, you get budgets for making sure that people keep on engaging on the platform, and you know how things work. Sometimes a new project comes and the attention is focused on somewhere else. And the biggest problem is that it's a long-term project, you know, and so you have different ways to manage this type of reigniting the project. So one of them, I think, is gamification, you know, and I think that it's not easy because the initial reaction of many companies to gamification is resistance. And because, oh no, gamification, you know, it's not for us. And by the way, more and more we talk about user activation rather than gamification, so that companies are probably more comfortable with user activation. The reality is that, you know, everyone enjoys playing and winning. That's the reality, you know. And Honestly, I think we have around 300 projects underway, and 95% of them incorporate gamification. However, I would say it's crucial to activate the right approach that aligns with the culture of your department or your company. For example, sales teams, they love competition. They respond very well to leaderboards. And on the other hand, for other people, receiving badges, peer-to-peer recognition can be way more effective. So the most important probably is to link victories with what I would call meaningful rewards. So for example, we have many clients who have connected the program with reforestation projects. We have planted more than 100,000 trees with our clients, and it's a very concrete reward. You get a tree that is planted for your efforts. So if you manage campaigns and challenges on a regular basis, okay, you can keep this momentum. Some people could say, oh, it's kind of artificial. We shouldn't need this type of thing. But the reality that it's so hard to keep the engagement and the attention of people that you need this type of activation. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just realized I was on mute then. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point. And who was it that I think it was, can't remember the chap's name from the post office at the event. And he talked about different rewards for different, do you remember? He said about different tiers. So he said, we have some swag for those that join the program. It's like a badge or a flag or something to put on their desk. And then the more you progress in the program, the swag gets a bit more right to personalized t-shirts and, so there's rewards, like visible rewards that everybody kind of is like, where'd you get that rugby shirt from? I want one of those, and it sparks it. But it's quite interesting. 95% of your programs, Jean-Louis, have gamification behind it.
Yes, and very traditional companies, accounting companies. And so at the beginning, it's not easy, but most of the time we say, okay, let's try. We'll see the impact on the analytics. Okay. And when people see okay, let's do it.
Yeah. So I'm going to come. So Sandy's kindly asked, it says she gamifies as well, but I'm going to, before we switch your mic on, Danielle, can you give us this was your topic. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of what you talked about at the event? I'm so sorry about my cat. Can you hear her? That's all right then.
So all good.
It's really
good.
distracting. But can you give us a bit of an overview?
Yeah, so we have a bit of a different approach. I'm very jealous and envious and aspirational to get to what Jean-Louis is talking about and what Sandy's going to be sharing with us. We don't do any gamification, and that's because we don't have any money. So we run this entire budget without spending $1. So we need to find ways to connect with colleagues in a way that ties back to values, purpose, and frankly, to their goals, meaning like getting their job done and how advocacy can enable them to do it better and faster and in a more sustained way. This means it's cost-free for us and it's effective as well. So some of the things that we do, and I think you've seen over the years, Sarah, is we use hashtags. And we use those to build community, and so that people come together similarly to the way that you have your intranet and other internal activities through internal comms. We build that out externally. So where we're doing, for example, there's the really large cycling races in Australia every year, the super cycles. So we have a whole external colleague community that participates in that, and we have a hashtag across that. With Pride, for example, we use Mercer Pride or Marsh McLennan Pride, etc., so that colleagues can engage with one another's content. And we use the advocacy platform to launch these kind of hashtag conversations and communities. And then we recognize through the platform, through newsletters and broadcasts, what colleagues are doing, the content they're creating, the brand obviously picks it up as well. And then we work with our leaders who are active to engage with these advocates online, to comment, to reshare their content so that they see kind of those leaders that they may not interact with on a day-to-day basis, actually participating in conversations with them on social. We also really, like I mentioned earlier with the steering and the business KPIs, we really tie those advocacy KPIs to our sales force, so that if they're trying to, build a pipeline or build new connections, nurture relationships, deepen a client sales pipeline, how exactly that can be done. And then we share the data back with them. And we deliver kind of on an annual basis, a scorecard of the exact contributions that they were able to make through advocacy that help contribute to their results. And when they start seeing that it plays actually a pretty substantive role, they keep doing more. And then we have them come into our training programs to talk to their peers, because obviously if you see someone doing what you need to be doing and they're doing it differently or more successfully, you're going to start coming along that journey as well. And then we use different ways of building, like on the different social channels, how they have like the direct messaging sections on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. We use those as well to kind of do encouragement. So if you have one or two SMEs that are really active on the channels, we create kind of a community of colleagues, not to post content and share, but so that if something is live on the channels, that they can kind of encourage one another as to how do I comment on this, or how do I overcome the fear of commenting on this, and then lead the way so that the other can kind of join in that conversation in what we call a safe space, because it's kind of colleague with colleague. And then as that progresses, we then know who these colleagues are, so we can kind of push those boundaries and now start having them comment on target audiences beyond what they're already doing. So we kind of use it as an incubator to actually experientially learn before they kind of go out on their own. So those are just some of the things we do, but we do, and the last thing I would mention too is we do highlight those advocates that are really making that difference in our town halls, and any kind of major launch event or other activities that are happening across the organization. There's always an opportunity to plug in these individuals and elevate their visibility across the firm.
Yeah, I remember you saying that at the event, Danielle. I've made a note of it actually, how you put advocate content in front of leaders. I'm sure you said that sometimes you do highlight it in a report and you send it to leaders to say, look, take some time to engage with your employees here. And quite often that can be better than swag, right? It can be even more motivational when an executive engages with your content on LinkedIn, and it just gives you such a buzz. It's brilliant. Sandy, I'm going to pull you in now. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience? Because you've got social selling programs. So how do you engage and gamify with them?
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So, full disclosure, we are a sociable customer. We launched that in April. We started with one.
You've gone a bit faint, Sandy. Can't hear you very well.
Let me pull the mic a little closer.
They are.
Better.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Yeah. So we launched with Sociable in early April with 100-seat pilot. Mm-hmm. And just from word of mouth from the sales reps on the things that we were doing in there, such as gamification, I've now scaled to 450 seats rapidly. Things that I'm doing, we just did a project or a product launch. And so I created a campaign and I gave them 2x the points that they could get if they shared it, regardless of whether it was attached to their particular product line or BU. Uh-huh. So that inspired them. We also have implemented the trees program. Oh. And it's really every new user that comes in gets a tree, and still working on, how we're going to do monthly. I've got, different configurations, 20 people will get selected. With what Danielle said, we have a newsletter that goes out that identifies the top ambassadors for the month, every month. And then in my monthly reports to executive leadership, I provide them with a slide of their top people to put in their town halls.
There you go.
So still working on how I'm going to use the praise system, and we're going to be creating some unique badges. But something interesting that happened yesterday was because of the trees program, some of our reps were starting to post content out on LinkedIn, and it said, "Oh, I love this trees program, and thanks to Quest Software." So I thought we better show this to our HR head so she knows what's going on. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is fabulous. What else can we do with this?" Wow. Because they have ESG reporting they have to do to the board. And they didn't, we really didn't have a good program, and the potential of this trees program to impact the company is pretty significant. But just by getting people excited with extra points, and you're right, salespeople love to be on leaderboards. In fact, so many were getting their high points for suggesting content that I had to reduce the number of points they were getting because they were overdoing it. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's brilliant. I love that. And I must admit, you guys, Jean-Louis, you did inspire us with our Tribals Trees program and reforestation of the planet. I just think it's such a meaningful way to do it. And it just makes a real impact, doesn't it? Thank you. Yeah, go for it, Rachel.
Sorry, Sarah. I was just to say, I think that's the really key thing, isn't it? The gamification piece needs to feel authentic to the individual and to the organization. So the trees thing is a wonderful idea, and you know, I think everybody would be in for that. But also the things that Sandy and Danielle were talking about as well, about just highlighting people for the great work that they've done, can be part of gamification as well. We're in the very early stages of this, I have to admit. I look at gamification and think, oh, how do we do it authentically? And I think there's been some super ideas on here as to how to engage people in an authentic manner. And yeah, things that I'll be taking away to do differently. But yeah, it's that authenticity piece, I think, that's really crucial to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
On.
I was just going to add on to what Rachel was saying about authenticity. I think that's such a great point. And the one way we do use the tool is probably the closest thing to real gamification, is there is a leaderboard in the platform that we use. And we changed the way the leaderboard works. Initially, it would reward and rank you based on number of shares. And we have the leaderboard set globally, and then we have the leaderboard set by geography. So for France, Italy, UK, etc. And then we have the leaderboard set by business. So that way, depending on who we're working with, but we changed the rating of how you get onto that leaderboard to be by engagement. That way we can actually see who's driving the most meaningful conversations. And then we pair that with the training. And we have one of our trainings that is just on how to build engagement, because ultimately, if you put your content out there, you can share 400 times in a week. But if no one engages with it or touches it, you're just broadcasting. So we've really tried to educate our colleagues to focus more on less shares, more meaningful back and forth. And that's how we kind of spark kind of the leaderboard activity. But I'm going to take away some great comments that Rachel and Sandy shared. And while we don't have any money now, aspirationally for when we might get a couple of pennies, some great things that we can be doing beyond what we're already doing.
Yeah, I also remember Nada from IBM shared at the event as well, didn't she? She said we tie it into our existing, what do they call it, Blue Points program. So they a lot of companies will already have some kind of, I don't know, reward mechanism or internally where you can send points to peers for doing things. So they've tied theirs into that. So look beyond, I think that was the message we got, was look beyond your program today. Look at other parts of the organization. Now you can hook this into that, which is another good one. I did have a quick question. So this one came in the post survey, actually. So when starting a program, do you usually look for minimum requirements of employees? Do you say, look, you can only join this program if you've got a network size of this, or do you just say, no, come on in, we'll help you progress? Well, I don't know if you've got any, Rachel.
Yeah, I think that the one basic requirement for people to be in a program is that they want to be there. I think is the real key bit. We don't want people to drag people along with us. We want people who want to be there, because those are the people who will take on the learning, take on the enablement. They will engage other people in. They will show you your return on investment, which will help you to expand the programs. And we're a huge organization. Having people who really want to be there is the thing that's going to help us to scale across the organization, I think. So for me, that's my one very basic starting point. We talked a bit about fishing where the fish are. So go with the people who want to be there, because they're the ones who will engage the most.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure there's other things, but that's my one basic rule, I think.
Yes, Sarah, and I fully agree. I think we have seen with many of the projects we have worked on that your best advocates might not be the ones you expect. When social media influencers may be very selective about sharing content related to the company because they work for the company, but they work for their own brand. And you may also have a very long tail of employees who have a smaller network. They don't generate that engagement that you expect, but in the end, they are highly dedicated to the company and they are great ambassadors. And I think it's important also to reward these efforts. You know, even if the level of engagement is low at the beginning because they don't have a huge network, they show a commitment and they must be rewarded for that. You know.
Yeah, love it. Danielle, you got anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I love both what Rachel and Jean-Louis were saying. I mean, our philosophy is to echo what you were saying, Rachel, is everyone influences someone. So you should not exclude people. At least that's my 2 cents. In an organization, it's hierarchical. On social media, there is no hierarchy. And that's why we see 10-year-olds with bigger social influence than some CEOs, right? So we have to keep that in mind. And I always like to remind people of that. And then the other thing is too, is when we started with a 400-seat pilot. And we actually just opened it up to anyone who wanted to join. We filled the 400 seats pretty quickly. And then we told everyone else that we were seeing how this was going to work. And then we would then from there expand so that anyone that expressed interest would be able to join the conversation. Within the same year, we went to an enterprise license. So at that point, we had 38,000 people in the platform, anyone who wanted. Now what we do though, is we do look at that engagement, so that activation. So we look at colleagues that, who are active weekly, obviously they're high value members. Those that are active monthly are ones that we work towards nurturing to becoming more active. But then we look at those that are really super inactive and we try and welcome them back, see if they want to join. Because some people just join in the spur because this is exciting, but they never actually take an action forward. So that's what I would say if you're doing a smaller pilot or a smaller group to start. Those that aren't actually participating, just check in with them. And maybe it's not for them, or maybe they tried it, or maybe it was peer pressure. And then it's okay to not be in the program, but we do exit them out. So we don't keep colleagues in the platform that are just idle, if that makes sense. But that allows us then to also control the size and make sure that those who do want in always have an opportunity to step into the program at any time.
We do the same thing, Danielle, and I think it's that's the beauty of a tool, isn't it? That it's got all the metrics in there, so you can look at your membership and segment out to who are your sharers, who actually are sharing too frequently, and how do you target interventions to help them to progress. Who are not active, who just joined, like you said, and because they got caught up in this part of the moment and not done anything. But then you can target your enablements to then broaden the reach and the scope of what you're doing and helping those people to progress. So the metric, it always comes back to the metrics for me, looking at the data to see how we can inform the next steps forward, really, to hit the strategy.
And also, I remember the discussion at the event was very much around personas. So identifying who needs that intervention and what intervention is that and what does that look like. And, I think for Jean-Louis, you said that you've got SMEs who work for the company, but ultimately they work for their personal brand and they need a different kind of enablement and requirement to move them to their next step as someone who's new and has just as much value, like Danielle said. They may have a small network, but they've got the motivation and they want to try and so how do you help them on their journey? So it's basically plotting and then giving everyone a path to move to their next progressive step if they want to. So I'm loving all the stuff going on in the chat. I can't keep up. Sandy, thank you very much. Basically rules of engagement: have a good profile, training will be provided, attendance at training classes, how to use the platform, and participate in monthly dedicated Teams meetings, so ongoing sessions. So it's brilliant. I love it, Sandy. I know you and I have spoken for years, actually. I'm so glad your program's taking off. It's really good. Right, I'm going to move on to the final section. I didn't realise we'd fill an hour, but we've managed to do it somehow. Activating leaders. So I'm coming back to that one. Rachel, you talked a bit about this. Have I not covered that already? No, measurement, that was it. Leaders. Do you want to touch a little bit on that? Because this was, and I noticed we've already had a few comments on this early on. Leaders are tricky, right? And it's hard to activate leaders that either don't believe in it, don't see the value in it, I don't have time for it, or we had all the objections in the room, didn't we? Do you want to just give us a brief overview on that? And then how you track, well, you've talked a little bit about that. So, and then maybe Danielle, you can chip in about activating leaders as well, how that differs.
Sorry, I'm off mute. It can be difficult to activate leaders, but I think it just goes back to that premise to start with the people who are engaged. And that's what we did. So there's the question, do you start a program with getting your leaders active, or do you go with a program and then activate your leaders afterwards? And I'm not sure that there's a right or wrong answer really, but we went with leaders first, because the more engaged your leaders are, the more engaged your employees are, and it just helps the program along. And you can demonstrate ROI along the way, but you don't need to start with all leaders. I think that's the point. So we started with leaders who were engaged and who wanted to be there and wanted to get involved. And we do that on a very one-to-one targeted approach for them. Their enablement is very different from other enablement programs that we put across the organization, because as leaders, especially for our execs who are spokespeople for the organization, it's super important that they understand how to be on social as a leader, because what they say can directly impact the organization in terms of shares or whatever. So they have very, very targeted one-on-one enablement to help them to do that. And we use metrics along the way, monthly reporting to show the ROI, to show them how they're progressing, even small things like their SSI increase. Or we look actually at the posts that they put and who's engaging, like you said earlier, Sarah, who's engaging, who is reaching out to follow them, what connection requests have they had, are they engaging with other influencers or other C-suites across the other organizations. There's lots of touch points that you can do to keep leaders engaged, I think, throughout, but we start small and then use the ROI again to expand across the organization. But I think there's a couple of things that we've looked at for scaling, and how do you scale across the organization. And there were two kind of roadblocks that I found. One was in terms of people who we already have engaged in the program. How do we keep them engaged for the long term? How do we keep them in the programs without having to do that tailored one-on-one service for the entirety of it? And then the second one was, then how do we engage more people in? How do we actually engage leadership to understand the power of having leaders active on social? So it's kind of identifying those roadblocks, turning them into your roadmap to scale that across the organization. And I think just to keep in mind, as with all employee advocacy programs, it's not a linear process. If it were a linear process, scaling advocacy, we'd all be doing the same thing and we'd all be, charging ahead. You just have to take things piece by piece, I think, build your jigsaw bit by bit, use metrics and reporting to help show the ROI and engage people, and treat it like a change management program. And that takes time, it takes patience, and it takes resilience. But that's how we're approaching it at Ericsson.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminded me, actually, thank you, Rachel, about Eileen at Henkel, didn't she? She said one of the things she talks to her leaders about is it sends a message when you're not active. So, even as a leader, if you're not showing up, and we know some CEOs that still aren't active, they don't even have a LinkedIn profile, and that sends a message to the market, to your employees, to your future employees. I'm going to, Danielle and Jean-Louis, maybe you can chip in as well. How do you do it, Danielle?
Yeah, so we broaden the term leadership a little bit, in the sense that if we look at like a triangle, we have the one-to-one, as Rachel was describing it, which is for our most senior executive leaders. And then we have kind of the level down below that, which is our leadership, but maybe like the leader of a business or the leader of a country, for example. So not quite at the executive leadership level. So we kind of look at the two different tiers. And when we first started our program, we did not start with leaders. So I guess the opposite of Rachel, we just went out to the employee population. So anyone, which included leaders, but we didn't start with like a North Star. We then did look at who joined the program and who was active. We went across and actually audited all of our leaders. We have a spreadsheet, really old fashioned, but we do, that has every single country and the CEO, and are they active? Are their profiles optimized? How often are they sharing, et cetera, et cetera. And then we were able to see who in the program actually from the start was a part of this activation, so we could then lean into them and start leveraging them as examples going forward. Though we do the white glove though. So, and this is something I do very regularly, actually working with our leaders to either get them started or to help them advance in their journey. And that's always normally one-to-one. Sometimes we might do like by region. So in Europe, the CEOs of all the countries will come together. And that actually works really well, because then some of the CEOs that are a bit more progressive might be sharing some of their ways that they overcome some of the fears or ways that other CEOs are kind of holding back on. So we do those sessions as well together. And then with the SMEs, we do like to help them see their peers. And I know someone in the chat had mentioned, how do you get competitive information? I mean, we work with organizations like yourself, Tribal, Sarah, and or others that can help get that data, because it is very difficult otherwise, especially on LinkedIn. But then we do unfortunately do manual. So we will look up the top 5 competitors, for example, and those peer CEOs, and we will manually scroll back and figure out how often do they post, and what does their profile look like, and how engaging are they, and what are the breakouts of the numbers of people that are commenting on each post being internal to their organization versus external. So we can come up with kind of a blueprint. It is a little bit of, chewing gum and string, so there's no shortcuts. But if you do that for the core leaders, it at least allows you to go back to them and say, hey, this is where you are, and this is where your top 5 competitors and your peers at those top 5 competitors are. And either there's a gap, or maybe it's almost like a scorecard. Like here, you're actually ahead, you're doing better. Whereas here, you're not, you're less consistent. Or maybe you're less authentic, or you're not as genuine, balancing out your core business priority posts versus maybe just some leadership lessons and learnings that you can share. And that actually really helps us break the ice. But the last thing I'll say is we do not force. We do have leaders that don't have a presence on LinkedIn, and that is their choice. And I'll say this, I had one CEO a couple of years ago who ended up having their profile hacked, and then there became 3 of them on LinkedIn, and we had many more on Twitter. And to navigate that for a CEO is high stress. That's all I'm going to say. So, and all I kept hearing this person say is, this is why I didn't want to do this. This is what, and it's a reminder of, you have to honor that if the person genuinely wants to do it or not, because at the end of the day, it is theirs. It's their name. It's their channel, even though it's really valuable for the firm. So there's a fear there. So we do also make sure that we are tracking every executive. So on LinkedIn, they make it easy. We ring their bells. That way we can see anytime they're posting, and our brand reputation management team knows to kind of hover around that profile for the next 3 to 4 days to see what's happening. And then we make sure that every executive has a partner. That partner could be their administrative assistant that we train. It could be their head of communications, but there is someone that is not letting that senior executive just float out in social on their own, because otherwise, unfortunately, they're not going to be the best at tracking their own profiles every single day.
Yeah. Do you know, though, it's funny that you mentioned that about the duplicate profiles. That is happening. And I always remember talking to Zoe Sands about this at Veritas, and her profile got duplicated.
Yeah, so did mine.
On LinkedIn, did it, Danielle? And it is a nightmare trying to fix it. It is a nightmare. And, execs are in, and it's interesting that exec said, this is why I didn't want to get involved. It's like, well, part of me is saying, well, if you managed your presence, actually, it would be... Jean-Louis, what have you got to add to that?
So what we've seen is that the company culture has a huge impact on the way leaders behave. And when you have a strong culture of exemplarity, for example, leaders are most of the time active because they want to send a message. If I can do it, you can do it. And in this type of company, you have kind of fun game. They ask for a leaderboard, so just the leaders, and they compete, you didn't do so well this month, and so it's very funny to see how exemplarity can help the whole company to align. And when the CEO say, okay, this is a company program, we need to be exemplary on this, and so it's very impressive, when you have this. And unfortunately, it's not always the time, and we have many times leaders who are sponsors, but not part of the program, and of course, it raises a lot of questions for people. Say, okay, that's fine. Okay, maybe we get the resources, but it might not be that critical if we don't have the execs part of the program. And it's not related to employee advocacy or social selling. It's for most of digital projects and main, I would say, we know that the commitment of execs is critical. It's a critical success factor.
Yeah, not in terms of just budget, but in terms of behavior change and inspiring behavior. We see it all the time with social selling programs. You can train salespeople all you like, but actually if the sales manager, the first line manager, is not supporting and embedding those behaviors in everyday conversations, it's wasting your money. So, right, we've only got a few minutes left. So I just want to, this is amazing. Honestly, I have got notes upon notes. Thank you very much. I'm sure other people have as well. Very quickly, because I want to give time. We've never done this before. So if this is a good way to bring the community together on a regular basis, maybe every other month, once a quarter, or whatever, where we can have these conversations and just sort of chip up and say, oh, I did this or I did that, then we will. So there's going to be a survey just come in a second. Futures, that's what I'm going to ask you all. There's the first thing that comes to my head is AI and employees loose on ChatGPT and all of that sort of thing. But where do you think this is going? Where do you think activating employees on social is going? Just very, very briefly. Jean-Louis, I'll start with you. What's your sort of prediction?
Sure. I think AI will have a huge impact, particularly for those who struggle with starting from a blank page. However, it's very important to maintain authenticity. Ensuring that AI is kind of extension of yourself rather than something that replaces your own thoughts and beliefs. So this is, we have worked on this topic for more than 1 year now, and we are starting releasing stuff on this, but we want to make sure that first it's a facilitator. It's something here to make things easy, and also it's very important for companies to keep control. Okay, yeah. Meaning that you have to make sure that, for example, the AI runs data on European data centers. For example, if you are based in Europe, that the data that will be prompted is not shared with other clients and so on. Otherwise, it's too risky. So, of course, for employee advocacy and social selling, you may think, okay, it's public content in a way, but sometimes the frontier is very tight, and you cannot put your company at risk sharing content on something that could lead to problems we have seen recently.
No, it's a very good point. What do you reckon, Danielle? What's your future crystal ball? Where's this all going? Not necessarily with AI, maybe you're thinking other things.
Yeah, I guess two quick things. One is we already know that the voices of the brand are our employees. And so it is the USP of any organization. I think more companies are going to actually realize this. There's still a gap between leadership truly understanding and realizing that they can no longer create this internally and then put it out there in an employer-centric way, and that actually is what people believe. So I think as we go into the future, they're going to realize that actually the employees determine that. So investing in employee engagement, employee experience, and building that cultural foundation is absolutely where they need to focus, so that the employees build the brand that they actually align with. So I think that that's still sorting itself out, and there's a big gap with how leadership actually believes how powerful their people are. And then I definitely think AI plays a huge role, and I saw kind of Sandy's comment, and we don't teach. So what we do is we have an engagement module series. So for those that have kind of passed the 101 and are now actually building their own content and driving meaningful engagement, in there we actually have AI included to help them show how to use the tool to thoughtfully maybe spark ideas or to think about how to frame things. But then we take that through to make sure that they realize, do not cut and paste it, right? Because there's enough out there, Me Too content. First of all, it's junk in, junk out. So that tool is not necessarily going to be bringing out the best in class all the time, but how to actually use the tool to get real meaningful content that you can then use and build yours all around it. So it actually has become a very good way to get over the hurdle for our colleagues who are like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to post. So we can show them quickly, here's a way to spark like 10 quick ideas. Now, can you go and write on all these? And they're like, yes, those I can write on. Great. So it's almost a way to build out their editorial calendar. So I do think it's going to help us, even from a team perspective, build out kind of more quickly different tools for different personas and then allow the human to figure out how to carry it forward. So I think there's a lot of potential and power with it, but you have to know how to use it and be very mindful of, ultimately, it is a human to human conversation.
Yeah, I love that. How not to use it. Sandy, that's funny. Oh, Rachel, what are you thinking for futures? Last minute.
I think, I mean, I would just echo Jean-Louis and Danielle, really. I think from an AI perspective, we are all learning on our feet. I think it's coming, it's here, but it's also coming thick and fast, more and more platforms coming up. And so understanding it and how we can adapt it into EA is crucial, because as Jean-Louis said, actually, it will help people whose sticking point is not knowing what to post or how to formulate the post. And we do see a lot of that. But without losing that authenticity. Go back to that word again, authenticity, because AI has the potential to do that. So I think, we're all learning on our feet and kind of running to keep up. And it's something we definitely need to be looking at more here as well, as to how we upskill our employees with the new technology that's coming out. But then, again, as Danielle said, I think just more and more companies getting on board with the fact that our employees are the experts of our organization and they are the voice of the organization, and only through our employees will we be able to drive authenticity, credibility and trust at scale. And I can only see that expanding more and more as we go forward.
Brilliant. Right. Thank you so much, everyone. We're just chucking a quick feedback up there. I think it's just a couple of questions. But yeah, if you found it useful, do let us know, and then we might do another one. But I just want to say huge thank you to Rachel, Danielle and Jean-Louis for joining me today, and just to sort of further explore. It just there was a lot of stuff that we hadn't finished talking about at that event. So it's given us a chance to do that. And honestly, I just don't think I could ever learn any more. And then I do. So even brilliant. That's so good. Thanks everyone for joining us. Look out for another one, depending on the feedback. We'll see about doing a different one. Have a great rest of day, and thank you, everyone. Take care now. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.